We're back and doing another Cloudburst. I'm here with my dad, Dave McNeil.
I am here.
And I'm Judah McNeil. And one of the things I was thinking about is, I was talking about with a friend, was the looking at the pros and cons of a young man seeking his fortune. Both of us look back and think, there's a side of us that we're, as we've come into our 40s, where we regret going out and seeking our fortune, and there was a impetus in both of us to get out from under our family and seek new adventure and
explain briefly what you did, and I'll explain what I did just briefly.
Oh, I mean, just leaving the state and leaving my community here and going to college, in Georgia, and it's far away, and really never coming back until about 2020.
Well, you went with friends to Montana, lived out there for a while.
That's true. Yeah. Went out.
I thought that's what you were talking about.
I'm just talking about in general, just
leaving home.
Yeah, because I mean, the Montana thing, it was, sort of an excursion.
Okay.
But in general, that feeling like I'm going to find success, I'm going to find influence. I'm going to influence the world by going out, looking for a place, getting education. And part of it was getting more education, and just thinking about how much more influence and security and success I would have had if I just stuck around and worked on building something and didn't build anything. Instead of, I looked for experience and education, and how that I look back and think, well, I have good memories. I learned a lot, but so what?
Wow. Okay. Going away to college, I was thinking more in terms, after I got out of the Army, I hitchhiked out to California to see friends out there, and just to look around and see what life was like, and the counterculture at the time. And so, and that was, I had very little thought, even when, so going to college and going into college way far away from my family. That's one thing. And staying away, of course, in the Army. But other than the Army, I never really thought much about having an effect on the world. And I'm sorry, I should have. I think we should be asking God. We should be talking to God. And I didn't have a very close relationship with God. As I look back now, and I see, asking God, what am I being called to? What am I doing? What's my role? What's my purpose? I just thought, well, I'm a guy. I'm a good guy, a good Baptist kid. I'm growing up, and I need an education, a good education. I'm a thinker, and I got to get a job. I got to, do something. And going away, I just sort of flowing,
As I think most people do, but that flow tends, because going back to what we talked about, the generational gap and the introduction of technology, being able to young people being able to see worlds and
away from home,
and all these different exciting opportunities. Where it used to be opportunity, maybe the next town. Now it's, you can go to California, you can go to
in the moment,
Canada, you could go to Japan.
That's true. I do think I'm more stricken now as an older man, and hopefully maturing some by this the idea of having a call, and for young people to be seeking their call. What's your call? When you're a little kid, they ask you, what do you want to be? And that's fantasy, because even little girls will say, I want to be a fireman, whatever. And they end up being firemen today, but it's also understanding that God has a mission for you, and he's giving you gifts. And that's the idea of the church. I didn't have an idea of the church at the time. I thought of myself as a citizen of the world, a better citizen. In other words, I always felt like, well, there's us Christians, us good guys, and this middle class people, and the riffraff. I mean, I did always kind of, in the back of my mind. It's not like I went around and say, "Oh, you're just riffing." I mean, it was in the back of my mind. Yes, I'm a good person. I'm a solid person. You know, I was in the Boy Scouts for a while. I was a boy in the Boy Scouts, and went to church, did all the things in the band, you know, in the high school, did all the things. And I thought of myself, but I never thought of myself in those days as a member of the church. I'm a Christian. I have a role. I have gifts. I have certain gifts that other people don't have. And they have gifts that I don't have. There's some things I can't do so well. You know, I remember as a kid they asked, what's a homework? Make a list of things. It was like 7th grade or something. What things can you do well? What things you cannot do well? And I asked my mom, I said, what about this? I said, I can do pretty much everything well. I can't believe I'd said that. And she said, well, you don't play basketball all that well. I said, yeah, you're right. You know, you don't listen very well. She could have said, you don't listen very well.
Well, I do think that there is an overemphasis, particularly in the evangelical church. I think this is a problem. I think it originates in the evangelical teaching that in the evangelical church, the Baptists, you know, the Pentecostals, just typical evangelical church,
yes,
where the emphasis is on being evangelical, is on missionary,
preaching the gospel.
Yeah, preaching the gospel.
Okay.
Instead of an equally weighted emphasis on developing, like you're saying, figuring out and developing your role to play in the church.
Yeah, ministry to others other than the gospel, right? That we always want to be glorifying Jesus. It's kind of hard not to, you know, as I'm thinking, I don't want to leave that. Yes. But there are ministries, and I was thinking, like for our family, it's one time I was thinking about our family, the idea of a mission statement. You know, what do we do? And there are roles, I think, for revealing to others the beauty of God's creation, you know, beauty in music, beauty in art, and glorifying God and say, look what God is doing. But look how beautiful things are. There's a lot of people see things in black and white and gray. And I'm convinced. I mean, a lot of people just don't see they don't stop and say, look at this. Look how pretty this is. Stop. Look at the moon coming up over there. You know, and I mean, that's very simple. Those are very simple things. But that attitude to minister to others, the beauty of the world that God has created, of the creation, not of the world. Now, we have to make a difference between the world and the kingdom of God. The world is out there, it's going on. And I think when I left home eventually, I was really entranced with the idea of what's going on in the world. You know?
Politics.
Yeah. But when I found myself back in the church, in the kingdom of God, and more, I needed to find my role in the church, in the kingdom of God, not in the world. Paul says, I don't want you to leave the world. So otherwise, you'll just be with yourself. You won't be able to minister the gospel and glorify God. Don't leave, but don't come completely out of it, but be apart from it. We are of God, and the whole world lies in wickedness. That's what John says in the 5th chapter of John, 1 John. We are of God. I mean but in those days, I just thought of myself as being a better person. You know, I raised better. You know, raised in a good family, being Southern Baptist, and you know, being a guy, and I had all this stuff going for me. But it was only within the church that I began to find my truth. So when to get back to the theme, going out, you're looking for something. What can it be?
Well, and I think if you're not sent out, that tends to be a problem too, right? I feel that there's
excellent idea.
Individual entrepreneurial spirit of the American boy or American girl to go out and sort of be their own satellite. Is it
good or not?
No, it's not.
It's not good. It's not good, folks, to send somebody out on their own. Now, that's got to be anathema to most people that are listening. You know, you send your kids get to be 18, 19, send them out. Bye-bye, Helen. You know, have a good life out there, you know.
Yeah. Well, of
Bye-bye.
course, but when they're 18, there's not much you can do.
Well, I mean, there's not much. Yeah, but remember, it's not just up to the parents now. I mean, we're talking to people who might be listening. You know, children need to make their own decision too.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen some very healthy situations where, in my own case, our own case, your sister Evangeline sort of went out with her friend, Chalk Girl, Lambeth, and they were in school together. They kind of went out together. And even though that was still scary and did not eventually work out the way they foresaw it, I'm glad they went out as two and two. Yeah. Jesus sent people out two and two. And I remember my friend wrote a song about me of the time called Lone Ranger for Jesus. Lone Ranger for Jesus. Somebody had told me that, and I used that phrase to somebody. And now I would say to someone, don't try to be a Lone Ranger for Jesus. Yeah. Even the Lone Ranger had Tonto. Yeah. And that's something to remember. We don't want to go out, because as you go out, the devil as a roaring lion is waiting to gobble up whomever he can. And the whole world lies in wickedness. I thought when I went out, I left the Army and I went out to California, and California was a beautiful place then. It wasn't as full of crazy people as it is now, and foreigners, you know. I mean, it was just a wonderful free place, and full of gentle, I mean, where I found it, gentle, hospitable people. But it was full of also a lot of wickedness. And I saw it from, you know, here and there and from distant. God shielded me from a lot of it. But when you go out as a single person, you're going out you're not shielding yourself from that roaring lion that's waiting for you, you know.
But I think one of the ways the church has failed young people these days is has become insular in a way that too much of the church has to do with its own solipsistic, enjoyment, instead of some kind of
engaging with the world.
Some kind of project with, or some kind of, I guess, work in the world. So,
well, but your church, and I know, like Parkview, they do things. I don't know. I mean, I can't judge whether it's good or bad, but I know there are things like soup kitchen work.
But I feel like there needs to be, we do a lot. But there needs to be, I think, some kind of interaction with politics in the world, where children don't feel like, not children, young adults, they don't feel like, well, if I stay here, we're just going to be
just us four, no more.
Singing in the choir is nothing to aspire. Well, I mean, it is something to aspire.
You have to. Okay, so yes, there has to be an interface between the church and the world, and a young man or a woman needs to move toward that. Find that place where there's an interface, where he or she is protected, though. Yeah, you know. Because they know what their role is and what their purpose is. Yeah, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to be a plumber. Whatever it's a service to other people. Yeah, that's not necessarily, but it glorifies God in the things you do to help. Yeah, help. Paul made tents.
I think there needs to be more interaction between. And we have some of this at my church. I like the fact that we have doctors and lawyers there that we can call and talk, like, what can I do about this? There's more, like you said, interface with the secular world, secular projects or work. Yeah. In the sense that we're not just here to, but we talk about the secular side of life, and we include that in the ecclesiology of.
Well, what would that mean? The secular side of life? I'm not really quite sure.
Well, secular in time,
dealing with the world.
Well, no, I mean, like, secular, just it's basic definition, just in time, the things that are not
going to church.
It's just the things that we have to do to
survive.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
So
all
like
right.
people have jobs. Everybody has to have a job.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But there is so much emphasis on, it feels, I think, growing up in the church, there wasn't this idea of, I think in our church, in the home church, there was, but in general, in conventional churches, there's no idea of building up a good lawyer, a Christian lawyer, or a Christian doctor, or a Christian. It's more of, are you going to be a missionary? You know?
Yeah. Okay. That may be true.
Singer or a youth pastor, instead of how do we interact with these other
that's
fields?
a good, calling, your calling.
So that I'm not choosing between Christian life and secular life. It's there's some kind of weaving of the two, not that we're beholden to the world.
I have to say, I'm kind of weak to think of. It's hard for me to think about that. I mean, to know. I mean, that's good question. I'm not really on top of it. To me, I think I've always thought, well, like teaching. In our family, it's been teaching and social work. Yeah. We've been teachers and social work.
Well, that's a good bridge.
Which is pretty much the same thing. One way.
Similar.
I mean, they're part of the same Venn diagram. It's just this stuff called humanities, and one part is social work, another part is teaching.
Well, that would be a good bridge, because there is a stark difference between being a lawyer, especially a defense lawyer, I would think, and being a missionary or a youth pastor. But maybe something between those.
Okay, let's think about. See the difference. Somebody says they're going to be your uncle is Dan. He's a criminal defense lawyer, and I said, well, how can you justify that in a way? I didn't say it indirectly. I said, well, now, Dave, if you were accused of a crime, wouldn't you want the best possible defense? And I thought, yes, I would. And it might be you, Dan. And I thought, good. Yeah. Good. In other words, it's a service to the lowest and the weakest of people. Who would that be? The people who are accused of crime. So that's good. Lawyers tend to be on the low end of what people think of what they really want for their children, I would think, because lawyers have always been kind of, we realize they're like the old, in the old time, the sophists, they take whatever law there is and reword it and interpret it to get their client off or get their way,
But even there, as I think about it, there is a dearth of any kind of explanation, any kind of interaction between the church and plumbers, electricians. There's no.
There's plenty of Christians that are plumbers and electricians,
but they're different worlds. There's no overlap. In other words,
how would you? So, what are you imagining?
Well, I guess I imagine a community, church being less about
the gospel. And
less
devotions,
less emphasis only being on the spiritual, so the Bible, and maybe including more. How do we take this into practices? Practice.
Well, I have to say, now that I think about it, I think that's what I really liked about Boy Scouts. Was the practical life of a man. Building a fire, sharpening a knife, sharpening an axe. Those are things I learned, and safety in those things, tying a knot. And I rehashed a lot of that in the Army, when in Ranger training, had a lot of that. But I think as far as young boys, I don't know about young women, but my wife and I have thought about what duties do we have toward your kids, and I think we have decided, if we can possibly work, to have them over and where the girls talk about cooking, especially about cooking. And with Asher and I, to do things that he might enjoy, like just like that, like building a fire, or sharpening an axe, things like he may not have ever done, are done very well. I don't know what you've taught him, but I think we had royal ambassadors in the Baptist church, but that did not address manly skills. It only addressed spiritual skills. And it didn't do it in a really, I don't think it did it in a very effective way, because reaching young men or reaching anybody with the Bible and spiritual life is very sensitive, and it takes counseling, and it takes sweetness of spirit, and it takes being with. It's for a father and for an uncle. It's hard to get a bunch of boys together, and you can just tell them. You can read the scripture to them. You can teach them all you want to, but boys, their spirit is somewhere else. It's a very rare boys thinking, "Oh, I just want this man to teach me about God." Little boys, they're just waiting to get out and get into trouble. I mean, I'm just saying that's the way they are.
Well, and I think that's where we could. I remember they did this study in the CMA about small groups, and because small groups were just not working. And the only church that had any success in the study that they found was the church that had small groups surrounding particular interests. So they had a motorcycle repair group. They had a
book
chess
club,
group. Maybe like a book club, but there was a lot more.
That's the only one I can think of that we have. I mean,
oh yeah. Well, there's a lot more like a woodworking group. There was a knitting group. Things that with practical.
Yeah. So as you're walking along, I remember our friend. I can't even think of her name now. But she said, "You come alongside." Teacher. He was the teacher, and if you remember her name, I can't. It's my age is catching up with me. But she had come alongside, and that's what you do with people. If you want to teach them, you come alongside. So if you're And I remember doing some things like in summer camp, when we went to Camp Caswell, we did some things, and those men, as they came alongside, you appreciated them. They, and the ones that showed us how to do. I loved Vacation Bible School, because we had crafts. And I wasn't big on. I was not good on crafts, but I loved doing it. Because then you had people showing you, and I felt particularly close to the people that were doing those crafts with us. So let's where are we now?
So to wrap it up, my gripe, I think, is just that, not my gripe, my fear, I think, because I'm part of this. It's not something I'm looking at from the outside. Is just that there's a chasm between the work of the church. There seems to be, or at least to me, like a chasm between the work of the church and all the other work that everybody is engaged with to live, and
that's right.
And some people do find their work in the church as far as they become a pastor, youth pastor, all these things. However, the majority of people in the world are not doing that. That's a minority.
Yes.
And so I guess my hope is that we can somehow contribute to bringing those things together, having, like you said, the interface or overlap a little bit more between the practical work, craftsmanship, and the life of the Spirit and the life of the intellectual life of the church.
I see, and as you think about how Priscilla and Aquila, how much they gained, and Paul gained from when they were sewing canvas to make tents. What did they talk about? They must have really enjoyed, and. Besides just encouraging each other in the craft, I'm sure they talked about things, of God and of their life and so on like that. So let's look at that. What is our responsibility in the church for callings that are not particularly divine? That is, callings that are not ecclesiastical.
Or even, it tends to skew more towards intellectual. Learning things and intellectual and spiritual. Where's the practical craftsmanship?
Right. And how does the church approach that, especially for young people coming up? If the church does have a role, and how does that? Please let us know what you think.
Yeah, we got 7 people watching right now, and would love for you to leave a little thumbs up or a heart, and if you a angry face if you hate it.
No spleen. No spleen.
Or leave us a comment. What do you think? What do you guys do in your church as far as interacting? We do have a knitting club, which I think is really good.
I'm not interested. Are you offering me a chance?
No, but we do have a lot of activities at our church with that interacts with the world, doing things. However, I'd like to see more men's groups. That
you can bring the plumbing club over to my house.
Okay. Will do. So please feel free to leave a comment. Tell us what you would like to see, some kind of group or club in your church that fosters a sense of the craftsmanship and bringing Jesus into the world of the field of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
That's something
to remember or to think about for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day.